The lights on the studio stage blazed like miniature suns, painting the American flag in fierce reds, brilliant whites, and endless blue. The crowd was already a tempest. Cheers clashing with boos, hands clapping beside others folded tight in resistance. A chant had just begun to bubble from the back row, something between reverence and rebellion, but it faltered when the music died and the man himself stepped forward. Donald Trump, in a navy blue suit with his tie knotted in presidential. Red didn't smile. His expression was unreadable, a strange mixture of solemnity and defiance, like a king returning from exile not to reclaim his throne, but to bless it. The teleprompters flickered beside him, ignored. His eyes scanned the audience like searchlights, trying to find a lost ship in the fog. "I'm not here to fight," he said, his voice calm but somehow thunderous in its quietness. The room tensed. A woman in the third row clutched her MAGA cap against her chest. A younger man in black shook his head slowly, arms crossed, jaw locked in suspicion. "Tonight," Trump continued, "I want to do something different." The cameramen exchanged glances behind their equipment. Even the floor director gave up on signaling the crew and simply froze in place. Something was off. This wasn't in the script. "I've been called a lot of things," Trump went on, pacing, now hands spread open. "Racist, tyrant, traitor, clown." He paused after each word, letting them hang like blades over the crowd. "But you know what the worst part is? I've let that hate eat away at me for years, and now I'm letting it go." A murmur swept through the audience like wind through dry leaves. Was this real? A prank? A trap? He raised a hand, not in anger, but in calm. "I forgive you," he said suddenly, turning directly toward the section where protesters had gathered. "I forgive all of you." Gasps erupted like small explosions. A man in a denim jacket stood up in disbelief. "What the hell is going on?" someone whispered, loud enough to be caught by the microphone. Trump didn't falter. "You made signs. You shouted. You wished me dead. And still, I forgive you." The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the eye of the storm. The energy in the room crackled. People didn't clap. They didn't yell. They just stared, waiting for the punchline, the mockery, the trap door to open beneath their feet. But Trump kept going. "To the journalists who twisted every word, to the comedians who made millions laughing at me, to the celebrities who used my name like poison in their scripts, I forgive you." The camera zoomed into his face. There were lines there not seen before, lines carved not by age, but by pressure, isolation, betrayal. His lips trembled, but he didn't break. "Do you know what it's like," he said, softer now, "to carry every headline like a scar across your back? To have your children cry because of things said about their father? To be mocked not just as a politician, but as a person?" The crowd was silent. The protesters, once loud, now stood like statues, unsure whether they were witnessing a miracle or a masterstroke of manipulation. Trump stepped closer to the edge of the stage. "This isn't weakness. This is power. It's easy to hold a grudge. It's easy to fight. But it takes real strength to forgive. And tonight, I'm choosing strength." A child somewhere in the back clapped once, confused. Then another. Then silence again. "And I don't expect applause," Trump added quickly, eyes narrowing, voice thick. "I don't need it. I just need you to hear me. Because if we don't start forgiving each other, me, you, all of us, this country will fall into a darkness we'll never climb out of." Somewhere near the center, an elderly man rose shakily from his chair. His face was pale, lined with history. He raised a trembling hand in the air as if to say something. Trump saw him, nodded once, and stepped back. Then someone screamed. Not out of fear, but like something inside had snapped. A woman, tears pouring down her cheeks, dropped to her knees. "I hated you," she cried. "I hated you so much I prayed you'd die." Trump didn't flinch. "I know," he said. "But I'm still here, and I forgive you." The room cracked open like lightning splitting a tree. People didn't know whether to run, cry, clap, or protest. Some did all at once, and yet Trump just stood there, arms folded now, not in pride, but in resolve. He had planted a bomb, made, of grace, and no one knew whether to fear it or fall to their knees beside it. He turned toward the camera, the only constant eye in the room. "I hope tonight starts something," he said. "Not a campaign, not a movement, a reckoning, not with each other, but with ourselves." And as he walked away, stage lights dimming behind him like a sunset collapsing over a battlefield, the crowd remained, frozen, shattered, stunned. A room full of ghosts trying to decide if they'd just seen a man fall apart or rise. Outside the studio, the night had turned electric. Reporters fumbled with microphones, trying to put into words what had just happened, their voices blending into an orchestra of disbelief and urgency. Police officers kept the sidewalk clear, though no one was rioting, not yet. People just stood, stunned, blinking like they'd walked out of a dream they hadn't agreed to have. Some clutched their phones with trembling fingers, watching the playback of Trump's words again and again, trying to decode the meaning behind them. Inside, the stage was still lit with an eerie afterglow. The podium stood abandoned, like a pulpit after a sermon no one expected to believe. But backstage, the air was chaos. Advisors argued in hushed, frantic tones, some angry, some breathless, some on the verge of tears. He went completely off script. He was supposed to talk about the economy. That wasn't a political speech. That was... what the hell was that? Trump stood alone in the dressing room, the door open just enough for a sliver of light to cut across the floor. He was breathing heavily, not from fear, not from exertion, but from the weight of something unspeakable. He looked at his reflection. It didn't look back like it used to. The face was older, not just from time, but from miles traveled in silence, in judgment, in war against a world that never forgave easily. He loosened his tie. The silence in the room rang louder than applause. Then, a knock. Ivanka stepped in, her face as pale as snow but her eyes burning. "Dad," she said softly, voice quivering. "What was that?" Trump didn't answer immediately. He reached for a bottle of water, his hand steady. He took a long sip, then stared at her. "That," he said, "was the truth. For once." Ivanka blinked. "You forgave them?" He nodded. "I forgave myself, too." She stepped forward, confusion written across every feature of her face. "But what now? People are freaking out. Fox doesn't know how to spin it. CNN's calling it a mental breakdown. Twitter is on fire." Trump gave a small smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Good. Let them burn with it." Meanwhile, in homes across the nation, televisions flickered with replays. Living rooms turned into debate stages. Families were arguing, crying, silent. A teenage girl in Atlanta paused her TikTok scrolling, mesmerized. A retired veteran in Arizona turned up the volume, heart pounding. A teacher in Seattle poured herself a glass of wine and sat down hard, shaking her head in disbelief. In Los Angeles, A comedian who had made his entire Netflix special around Trump collapsed into his couch and muttered, "He just stole my whole act and flipped it." In Brooklyn, a man who had written "Death to the Donald" on a protest banner weeks ago was now sitting in his apartment, staring at the banner rolled up in the corner. He lit a cigarette with hands that trembled. "What the hell just happened?" he whispered to no one. Back at the studio, the crowd still hadn't left. Security hesitated. No one was throwing bottles or shouting anymore. They were talking, debating, some hugging, some crying. A young black woman who had come wearing a shirt that read, "Trump is trash," now had her arms folded tight, lip quivering, eyes darting as if her beliefs were betraying her right there in public. A man beside her, a proud veteran with a Trump flag on his shoulders, noticed her shaking and, without a word, gently offered her his coat. She stared at him. "Why would you?" "Because he just did," he answered. It didn't make sense. And yet it did. In Washington, D.C., senators from both parties had gathered in front of screens. Some were red-faced with rage. Others were stunned into silence. One whispered, "He's upending everything again. Only this time. Not with fire, but water." A staffer rushed into a private chamber. "The president wants to respond. Should we release a statement?" "No," came the tired voice of an aging senator. "Not yet. No one can follow that without sounding petty." The world didn't move for a while. It spun, sure, but no one was dancing. The spell had not broken. Backstage again, Trump stood before the exit door that would lead to the press gauntlet. His aide looked at him, eyes wide. "Do you want to take questions?" He shook his head slowly. "No? Let them ask each other." "But they're already dissecting every word." "Good," Trump muttered. "Make 'em think. For once, make 'em feel." He stepped out, and the cameras lunged toward him like hungry beasts. Flashbulbs exploded. Reporters screamed his name. He didn't stop. He didn't wave. He just walked, slow and steady, a silhouette against the chaotic light, as if this moment didn't belong to him anymore, but to the storm he'd left in his wake. In a control room buried under the studio, a producer replayed the speech again, the audio echoing in the empty space. The words rang like church bells at midnight. "I forgive you." Each time it played, it felt different, heavier, stranger, more sacred. And as the second hour passed, something odd happened. The phones started ringing at news stations, not with threats, but with tears, with questions, with stories. A woman who had lost her brother to suicide after being radicalized online called into a conservative talk show, her voice breaking. "I don't know if it was real or not," she said, "but for a second, I thought maybe there's still something human in all this." A young man who had vandalized Trump Tower in 2020 called a late-night program and confessed. "I hated him. Still might. But I'm wondering now if I can be forgiven too." And the talk show host, someone who had once screamed into a microphone about libtards and traitors, just sat in silence. Because the conversation had changed, the whole game had tilted, and no one knew what came next. The night deepened, but the world stayed wide awake. Across continents and languages, subtitles translated every syllable of the speech, from Tokyo to Paris to Johannesburg. It wasn't just American networks airing reruns, it was international media dissecting each line as if decoding scripture. Headlines clashed like swords. Trump forgives enemies in stunning U-turn, performance or prophecy. The pardon heard around the world. By morning, The sun rose on a world unsure whether it had witnessed a political stunt or a genuine rebirth of spirit. Coffee shops buzzed not with sports talk or stock updates, but with hushed conversations. Old friends who hadn't spoken since the 2016 election found themselves texting again. Fathers called daughters. A brother apologized to his sister after 4 years of silence. In a Baptist church in Georgia, the pastor rewrote his entire sermon on the spot. "I saw a man last night drop the sword," he told his congregation. "Maybe it's time we all do the same." In New York, at the front steps of Trump Tower, bouquets of flowers began to appear. Some came with notes, long letters, folded, prayers, confessions from strangers who had hated him and hated themselves for it. The gold of the tower gleamed in the rising light, and for once, it wasn't just a monument to ego. It had become something else. Something trembling on the edge of sacred. But not everyone was swayed. In underground chat rooms, the far edges of extremism convulsed with fury. "It's weakness," they screamed. "He's caving. He's one of them now." Plans were made. Rumors whispered. Some wanted revenge. Others wanted answers. They hadn't prepared for this. They had worshipped the fighter, not the forgiver. At the White House, the current president met with aides in an emergency session. "We have to respond," an advisor insisted. "He's hijacked the narrative." The president, older and wiser than most, gave credit, simply looked out the window toward the Capitol. "You don't counter a ghost with a press release," he said quietly. Meanwhile, Trump stayed silent. For 3 days, no tweets, no rallies, no interviews. The silence screamed louder than anything he'd ever said. And then, just as it reached a fever pitch, he reappeared. Not at a campaign event, not in front of cheering supporters, but at a community center in a Rust Belt town he had once dismissed as forgotten. He walked in alone. No stage, no podium, no music. Just rows of folding chairs and people who looked like they'd seen too much and felt too little in return. "I came here," he said, voice quieter than usual, "because I wanted to look you in the eye when I said it again." A man in the front, missing 2 fingers and half his hope, grunted. "Say what?" Trump looked directly at him. "I forgive you, and I'm asking you to forgive me." Gasps. Silence. And then a chair creaked as a woman stood, her hands shaking. "My son was deported under your administration," she said. "He was 18. He grew up here. He never came back. I don't know where he is." Trump closed his eyes just for a second. "I know, and I carry that every day. I don't expect forgiveness, but I will ask for it anyway." No applause, no chants, just a strange, aching quiet, the kind that precedes either collapse or communion. Then, something remarkable happened. The woman stepped forward. She didn't hug him. She didn't scream. She stood in front of him and nodded. "I'll think about it," she said, and walked out into the gray light. And that was enough. The media didn't know what to do with it. Pundits melted live on air, their scripts worthless. "Is he running?" they asked. "Is this all a setup? Is he broken? Is this the start of a cult? A breakdown?" But something deeper was already shifting. A college professor changed his curriculum to include the speech as a philosophical text. A former Trump aide publicly apologized for past rhetoric. A progressive activist posted a video saying, "I don't trust him. But damn it, I felt something." And in small towns and big cities, people began meeting. In parks, in libraries, not to protest, not to campaign, but to talk, to remember how, to look each other in the face and try not to see an enemy. Days later, Trump was invited to speak at a peace summit, a stage that had once banned him outright. He arrived late, alone, no entourage. He took no notes, no security flanked him. He stood before world leaders, celebrities, enemies, allies, strangers, and said, "I was wrong about a lot of things, so were you." But being right was never the point. Being whole was. I lost that along the way. Maybe you did too. But today, I'm asking the world to consider something terrifying. Forgiveness, not as surrender, but as revolution. And the crowd did not applaud. Not yet. Because they were too busy weeping. Because they knew what he said wasn't for votes, wasn't for history books. It was for something much harder to win. It was for the soul. And for the first time in decades, something across the earth seemed to unclench just a little. Not enough to fix everything, but enough to begin.